Hello, and welcome to another episode of Read, Return, Repeat. I'm Sarah Dixon.
And I'm Daniel Pee-wee-Wardy. Welcome to the show.
In this episode, we're going to talk about category number 5, which is a book told from a villain's point of view.
So, Sarah, I was thinking, since today's episode's about villains, I want to do a couple of villain impressions. And I'm going to do these, and we'll just call it Guess the Villain.
Clever title.
All right, okay, here's my first one. And these are mostly literary villains, so I'll do this one. How much have you lost in the coin toss?
I don't know. I don't do villains.
Okay, that was Anton Chigurh from Cormac McCarthy's No
Oh,
Country for Old Men.
yeah.
You'll bring me the money.
Okay. All right.
Okay. This one, this was, I'll do a harder illusion, but then I'll do one that's kind of like,
Okay.
You'll probably get it. Okay, so it's like, was she a great big old person? Are you about a size 14? It puts the lotion on the skin.
Oh, Silence of the Lambs.
Buffalo Bill, yeah. I did
Okay,
not. That
okay.
was not my best one.
Okay.
But that actually just sounded.
I'm more like lines than voice quality, I think.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. All right. Okay. Here's my next one. Okay. Perhaps he is wondering why you would shoot a man before throwing him from a plane.
I don't.
You merely adopted the shadows, Batman. I was born into them. That's Bane from Batman.
Okay, I was like, wait, the Wicked Witch of the West? I don't know.
All right. Anyway, that's my terrible impressions.
Those were amazing. Maybe? I don't know.
Well, that's not why we're here, so...
You're right. Let's get to the interview, shall we?
That sounds great. Today's guest is Natalie Zina Walschots. Natalie is a writer and game designer whose work includes LARP scripts, heavy metal music journalism, video game lore, and her writing for the interactive adventure The Aluminum Cat won an IndieCade Award.
Today we're going to talk about her novel Hench, which was released in 2020 by William Morrow Publishing and was a Canada Reads finalist in 2021, where it was championed by the Mandalorian's Paul Sun-Hyung Lee. Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that this episode. And she lives in Toronto with her partner and 5 cats, which is arguably too many cats. And that's from her own bio.
Yeah.
I don't think you can ever have too many cats or dogs.
I'm
really.
allergic, so there's definitely a limit on cats that can be around. But
Bummer for you.
let's go ahead and jump into it.
Let's welcome Natalie.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's so awesome to have you today. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's go ahead and get started. Can you tell our listeners about Hench?
Sure thing. It is a book about the people who work for supervillains. I think that the idea of anti-hero stories or stories from the villain's perspective are one thing and are wonderful. But I really wanted more stories to exist about the people in the background who work for them, people who are filling out the spreadsheets and, taking those early punches from the superheroes and sort of the appetizer fights before the big showdowns. I wanted to know what terrible circumstances led them to make these life choices that got them there. So the book is about that.
But it also kind of seemed like it wasn't always awful. I mean, yes, what happened to our main character, the auditor, she went through some rough stuff, but at the beginning of the book, it just seems like she's like, oh, I just kind of fell into temping for villains,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like there was a big thing that happened to her that made that happen, unless I forgot that. And I thought it was really interesting that she just fell into temping for villains.
It's like, I mean, a lot of us don't have tragic backstories, right? But
Right.
we do kind of fall into temping for villains, you know, like it's not one big tragedy that like
Yeah.
derails the course of our lives and turns us into what we are. It's a million tiny ones, you know, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. And as somebody who I finished my master's degree in like 2007, so like immediately before one of the greatest economic downturns in you know recent history. And I spent a lot of time temping for villains and doing in the real actual world and doing a lot of small terrible jobs that weren't always that bad, right? Like some were awful and some were fine and some were actually kind of fun. And I watched so many of my genius, hilarious friends and colleagues going through exactly the same thing, you know, over and over and over again. So the auditor's story, you know, and certainly there's a major turning point for her.
Yes.
But a lot of her backstory is not a tragedy. It is 1,000 tiny ones that kind of leads her into a place of, you know, maybe not making the most virtuous decision that she could.
Well, and that's why I think I really liked that approach because it felt very natural, right? It was just like,
right,
what happens next? Oh, well, I got a job with this other villain. And so that lasted for, you know, a couple weeks. And so anyway, I liked that. And actually, I was going to ask you about what inspired you to write a book from the villain's point of view.
Well, it comes from a real place.
Yeah. So do you want to talk any more about that backstory?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I spent like, it was the story that I felt like a lot of my friends and I, in a lot of the time was living, and I gained a real appreciation for. I don't think if I wouldn't have gone through that experience, I would have understood how supervillains get anybody to work for them. In particular, like I remember being a little kid and, you know, watching like, you know, Batman, the animated series and, you know, all these and the X-Men and all these superhero shows and being obsessed with them and like not understanding at all why anybody would do this job. Like, it's like, oh, it's very simple. It's like bad guys. And now that, or once I had sort of like grown up and gone through that process, and it's like, okay, I can't make my rent, but I could take this 6-week contract for this oil company, which is not working for a supervillain, right? You know, like, and that, you know, when it's the choice between like, okay, I will get evicted, or like I can't eat if this is the only job that is available to me. Those kind of like quibbly moral decisions, or not quibbly at all, like significant moral decisions become very different when it's like a desperate situation, and feeling that kind of like, you know, a lot of the opportunities I thought would be available to me or that I was promised in a lot of cases just evaporating, and finding, you know, myself and looking around and seeing all my like extremely brilliant idealistic friends in very, very similar situations. I'm like, oh, I understand why you put on a ridiculous outfit and go work for the Penguin. It's because you owe child support. That's why you do that. Like, absolutely. Like, you need to get your car out of impound. Like, that's it.
Student loans got me henching.
Student loans got me henching, man. Absolutely. Like, and that's just the situation that, like, I think a lot, if not most people alive right now can sympathize with in a really major way.
I'm thinking about all the like weird jobs I had out of grad school.
I've had so many weird jobs, man, right out of grad school. So many weird jobs. I worked
for a company that made a literal earthquake machine and their archives. I'm not naming. And then I also
Are you serious? That's amazing.
Like, I worked for a search engine company. and I had to flag search results from a country that had a lot of censorship and things. So yeah, I guess like I
Whoa.
did
Yeah,
think
like
of,
that's not
like
that feels
like,
icky, right? It's like, ooh, I don't like that I'm doing this. Yeah, I worked for I did a lot of SEO. I learned how to do SEO working for a porn company, and like you got to get your tags right. Let me tell you, like people are looking for very specific things, and I learned
tag.
totally like I learned so much about like the vocabulary, extraordinary, but I learned so much about how the internet worked from like doing that job, and how social media worked from like doing that job. And there are so many examples of just like, oh yeah, I worked for 100 super weird things, and I definitely was a personal assistant briefly for somebody who was definitely asking me to make copies of super illegal things. You know what I mean? It's just like, this is definitely not legal what I am doing right now, or what I am being asked to do. But I would like to collect my paycheck. So I'm going to become selectively blind and copy this piece of paper or whatever, like that's, you just kind of like put your blinders on and do I am just filling out this spreadsheet. I am just installing the software on this person's computer so they can check their email while they are super working at a weapons company or whatever it is, whatever like terrible thing it is you're actually in the service of, right? I did a lot of tags for, and I didn't even think like porn is like capital E evil or anything. It's just like, oh, this is a job that is for sure weird and is a place I did not think I was going to end up in. And like, I am also learning a lot, and it's also shaping the person that I am. And the executives I work for are sometimes really nice and sometimes absolutely super shady. And it's the same thing with like every ad company I worked at, or it's the same thing for like any of the social media gigs that I did, where it's like, oh, some of you are wonderful and I'm learning a ton, and some of you are like literally terrifying. I'm pretty sure you have a chest freezer full of torsos somewhere. Like the vibes are so abysmal. So, you kind of like, you have enough of those experiences, and you also feel very disposable in those situations. I never felt like, oh, I am valued in any of these positions. It's like, I am a body who is here to fulfill a very specific function and do one specific job. And if I have a problem with it, someone else will fill out this spreadsheet, right? And that kind of like awareness of my profound replaceability in a lot of those positions, like I think that also bleeds into the book, and for sure informed a lot of that. Like, oh, hench people are disposable, right? They're like human cannon fodder that you like throw at a hero.
Yeah.
I thought the first villain she works for is the Electric Eel, and I really got the vibes from him and stuff. And like, honestly, like your characters are so great and they're interesting and detailed. I love like Leviathan had a pet iguana
named Sharon.
Yeah, and it's
Sharon. Yeah.
So like, what made you add such colorful quirks to your evil characters? I know like it has a humanizing element, but yeah, like where was the inspiration for that?
I mean, people are just so weird. Like humans on the earth are so profoundly weird, like every single one of us. And I don't think I've actually met anyone who didn't somewhere in there have Shannon the iguana like somewhere in their life, right? Like that there's just like, oh, you have like a hyper fixation on this one specific thing, or like, like you meet somebody and you're like, oh yeah, let's go over to their place for the first time to play D&D, and it's like, oh, you breed salamanders, and I'm now walking through like this hallway just like lined with salamander tanks, and like I did not think this was going to be my day, but cool. Like I've just met so many people who, have Shannon the iguana. So I just felt like, I'll certainly, if ordinary people like in quotation marks around me are like profoundly weird and super care about unusual things, like definitely my supervillains do, like for sure. And I also just like flatly don't believe in that like the kind of caricature of the unfeeling supervillain. Like no one cares about things more than supervillains. And I think that we kind of do, I think we do a lot of characters like a great disservice of being like, oh, they're like not emotional and they're detached and like, you know, they're like this sort of like solitary, like incredible, like, no, they're really weird and have a lot of feelings and like definitely are going to like pour that into the various things that they do.
Yeah, so were there any like quirks that you have of your own self that you put into some of these characters at all, or?
Oh, geez. I mean, like I definitely, as somebody who has the anxiety, I certainly like drew upon various elements of, I think, like my own neuroatypicality when writing The Auditor, right? Like I definitely like channeled a bunch of that kind of like over analyzing every possible angle of a situation and kind of turning that into like a problem solving task, you know, element there. I don't know, probably I tend to think of like myself as the most boring person in the world just because I spend so much time with me, but it was less like, oh, I'm going to put this specific thing I super care about. Oh, horror movies. I will say that the Auditor like does very much enjoy horror movies, and so do I. And it's also been like it makes dating, or at least for me, briefly made dating quite difficult during the unusual periods that I've done that, where it's like, oh, let me like show you one of my favorite things. Oh, you hate this. Okay, right. Never mind. We'll just nod and move on. So probably that. And just, yeah, I would say that, and maybe her complete inability to like deal with being around anyone that she's attracted to in a reasonable or sensible way, or return that kind of attraction gracefully at all.
All right.
Yeah.
So the superheroes in the story kind of symbolize the unchecked power, and then, you know, the Auditor's approach is to kind of like do this call for accountability. They even like harness the power of a hashtag, and I couldn't help but think of like the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter, and so these big social media pushes to call people out, right? And so did you use these kinds of social movements as the inspiration for that kind of thing, or was it like, because you don't want to cross the line into parody, right? Because they are meaningful and important things. But I definitely was catching those vibes. So can you talk a little bit about how you did that?
Sure. It was I wouldn't actually say that like it was necessarily inspired by, it definitely wasn't inspired by any one movement in particular. The main bulk of the writing of Hench kind of like wrapped in 2019, like relatively early 2019. So just for like kind of timeline, obviously there were like some edits after that, but the like main bulk of the writing and narrative arc was done by then.
Well, I guess you said you worked in search engine optimization, so that was kind of like your whole bag. So you must have had. Okay, I'll stop interrupting you.
No. It's totally fine. But yeah, that and also in social media in general, it was more like, where are the places that I have found success in a way to reach people at a large scale and power. So it's less like, oh, I want to try and harness the power of this like one particular social movement. It's like, oh, I have seen what social media can do, both like for positive and for negative. You know, I was definitely writing a lot when Gamergate was a thing. Which was something that like I went through personally as somebody who was like working on a PhD in feminism and video games in 2014 and 2015. It was just like, literally the thing I am doing. Oh, my life is super bad now. So having been on the opposite side of that also, you know, I sort of like had I had both sides of the experience, right? I saw how something could be weaponized as like the person on the other end of that point, but also how you could reach people and, you know, kind of like harness that ability. And what could I, as one person, do to like challenge somebody who, from a traditional or objective point of view, was so much stronger than I am? Like, what could I do? This was a thing that I could do. So I really wanted to. It came less out of like, oh, I'm going to try and, you know, parody this movement, and much more out of like, well, what would be the tools that somebody like Anna would have? You know, what is available to her as somebody who doesn't have like flight or laser vision, and who is just a person who has the same access to skills and tools that I do. You know, what could I do in that situation? What could anybody do in that situation? And as I think it is borne out repeatedly, like that absolutely is something that like I or we or a person can do, that it is possible to that there is a lot of power to be taken there if you kind of hit on the right thing at the right moment. And of course, a lot of that is like lightning in a bottle, right? Like things happen at specific moments, but it's also very difficult to like curate and repeat them. But like, so there's definitely like kind of a balance of skill and luck there, but it is still something that like, an ordinary person could do.
I really like that. I'm kind of like an online person with like internet history and just like social media stuff. So like I was like, I feel well represented. Like
Thank you.
I did have a question. So I think I saw something on your bio about like like women in fridges, which for people that don't know about, like, and you have a very like I feel like I won't give it away, but there's a strong allusion to women in fridges in the book.
There is, in fact.
Okay,
quite direct, yes.
So for people that don't know, there was a blogger like almost 20 years ago that kind of noticed like a sexist trope in comics, where how women were treated in like the mainstream Marvel and DC universe and stuff. And like, yeah, your book is like obviously
so
there's
really like women in fridges.
Yeah, Captain Major Adam killed. It's based on what happened to one of the Green Lantern's girlfriends. I won't go into the details, but if you look at women in fridges,
there was a refrigerator. Yeah, it was Gail Simone, and yeah, that was something that inspired me a great deal. There are definitely like fairly direct, I would say, allusions to it in the text. And it's not just like the kind of trope is not just like, you know, dead, right? Like it's not just that, but it's specifically that women often end up either dead or depowered in some way, but it's never in service of their own story. It's in the service of another character's story, usually a man, right? So it's like, oh, it's not about what happened, like the very classic like woman in a refrigerator kind of, you know, crystallizing moment is like, it's not about her. It's not sad that this has happened to her. It's that like, it's sad it happened to the Green Lantern, right? So it's very specifically, you know, terrible things like, you know, whether it's depowered or permanently wounded in some way or straight up dead. But the tragedy is never that this thing, or the kind of narrative tragedy, the narrative like load bearing point of that is never about them. It's about, well, how does that affect the men who are around them? Like how it's the kind of like, and before I say this, like I love John Wick, but it's the John Wick dead wife, right? Like it's not about like, can you tell me a thing about her or why he likes her or like what their life together was? Like, no, absolutely not. But like, she's this kind of background shaping force, as you know, in his life. Is like, oh, this was the thing that had saved him, but now it's gone. So all of these things happen, but it's not. It's a very, like, it's a trope you see in a lot of media. It's just in comics, and particularly like at a specific moment in comics, it was a very, very common. And yeah.
I thought Hench did a good job, even just like kind of like paying tribute to that by just like talking about collateral damage in general. Like we don't ever talk about the collateral damage of these like superheroes and stuff. So
But I can't.
Yeah,
tell
and I mean, there are a lot
watching,
of.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say,
yours is going to be way more important than what I was going to say.
All right. Yeah, I it's all about collateral damage, right? And I think that in general, superhero media does a really great job of like showing the impact only for the moment of impact, and then like moving away super quickly. Like I remember seeing a trailer for an Avengers movie, and Captain America picked up a pot hole like lid and like just winged it at a guy's head, and there's like, and then the camera pans, that man is dead, man, like you like hang on, like time out, that dude is obliterated off the face of the earth, right? And it's like this 1 second of impact, and then that person essentially disappears, but like they're dead, right? Like someone has to tell whoever their next of kin is, a whole chain of, or like you see like Batman like drop somebody down like an elevator shaft and then walk away, like that person now has like a complex spine injury and like a long, potentially impossible like road of recovery ahead of them. And like Batman doesn't murder is also like such BS. Just let me get that out of the way. Like you can't tell me that person did not die 3 years later of like a bed sore, which by the way is still murder legally. Like if someone dies of their injuries, including sometime later, like there's not like a time limit on that, right? It's not like, oh, they didn't die within the first 72 hours, so like I'm home
so
free.
You're absolved.
Like yeah, like it doesn't count. It's like, no, it super counts the whole time. And that like I really wanted to have the camera stay in those moments, right? Like I wanted to show what is actually happening there if you don't look away, like if you don't just kind of play all that, like all the explosions and like buildings falling down and people getting thrown through walls, which for sure, like I love all those movies too, right? Like I love all those stories. This is my, one of my favorite forms of media for sure. So it like, this is coming from a place of love, but like you are looking away before you really have to like deal with any of these consequences. And I wanted to see what would happen if the whole story was consequences.
So I've never looked at those movies and been like, oh, that henchman was struck in the face with the thing. Sorry, dude. Like I've always been like, oh man, that whole building came down. That's going to cost a lot of money. Wow. Like,
or just thinking how everyone's like, oh, you're unemployed. Just like, like the whole grocer coffee shop, there's like 12 people out of a job. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Like, or just the like sadness of like, oh man, that was my favorite coffee shop, and then a car got thrown through it. like,
oops, that was my car,
right, oops, that was my car. And also now, like, that mom and pop coffee shop can't afford to rebuild, so actually they close, and then there's a Starbucks there in 7 months, and like that's its own kind of tiny loss, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's so many of those, right? Like huge tragedies and intimate tragedies, and like, just tiny sadnesses that happen all the time when you have these like colossal forces colliding with each other. And I also think that like, I think it's actually very significant that you're like, oh, I've never really thought about what happened to that hench person who got a whatever thrown at their head. I think we're really conditioned not to. Like, I think we're actively like told not to think about the fate of these people, like both in media and also like in the world. And the idea of like criminal activity is hugely dehumanized or dehumanizing in kind of the way it's portrayed. It's like, oh, well, these people like stole something, so it's fine. We can like, or, like they have a criminal record, so we can do whatever. Like that's profoundly messed up. And like in a deep way. And you know, the fact that it's just like, oh well, they were like a bad, like I said when I was like a little kid, it's like, oh, they're a bad guy, so like it's fine, it doesn't count. Yeah, it counts. Like their humanity does not get blinked out of existence because they went to work for the Riddler or whatever, you know, like it's such a, but you know, like there are large systemic terrible reasons why we are taught to like kind of ignore the humanity of anyone who is sort of like placed in that category or criminalized in any way. Like we're supposed to look away and we're supposed to think like, well, it's fine that it happens to them because it's not going to happen to me because like I'm a good productive citizen who like works for an insurance company, which is possibly actually worse and does more damage than like working for the Riddler if you actually like look at the, you know, surface area of human suffering.
And can we talk about, you said the insurance agency, it made me think of the spreadsheets and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Can you go into that and kind of tell the readers about how data and research and information plays into the book? And also I read somewhere that you actually did a lot of research for the book.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So all the data in the book is real. So like Anna can be like looked at as a data analyst. A lot of what she does is data analysis. And she sort of like, she knows in the sort of way that we all like know that heroes probably do more damage than good in the world, like, or at least maybe that's me, maybe I'm the only person who feels that way, but like the vibe was like there are sure a lot of buildings blowing up in a lot of these movies and a lot of innocent bystanders being murdered to capture that one guy who robbed a bank or whatever. Like maybe I don't know if the balance is correct here. And so she starts counting like the property damage and the injuries and the death tolls and, you know, that heroes kind of cause during their daily operations, and gets a sense of the like total in life years, what they cost the world. Now the math is real. It is used by like international organizations to calculate the human toll of natural disasters and other kind of like cute large scale whatever. The you know, data scientist who developed it and cited in the book is real. He very kindly gave me permission to cite him and his work. And all the numbers that Anna uses and applies are real numbers that I found in comic books. So like I did a bunch of reading where like I would take a book specifically over like time periods. So like if there's an arc that it's like, okay, I know this takes place over 13 months. So I can tell like what this hero was up to, at least for the scope of this narrative within this like 13-month period. And then I counted all of the injuries, all the property damage, all the death, what kinds, any data that we had about like what kind of injuries. I tried to go into other kinds of economic disenfranchisement, but it's, you know, you don't often see a lot of that, but it's like if it was noted that like, oh, this person was unemployed now, like I could add that in also. Then I applied the daily math, so that DALY, disability adjusted life years, to that data and came up with a like number of like, oh, okay, in human life years, this is what this 13-month period cost for this hero to be in operation, and kind of compared that against like that good result. It's like, oh, well, this, I don't know, this like laughing gas wasn't released into the water system of this city or whatever. And let me tell you, the math did not come out well for the heroes in question. So I like, it's, the counting is real, the math is real, and then I use that data throughout the book to kind of like, because I wanted it to not just feel real, but actually be real. Like, okay, if you like look at the operations of a hero and you run that math and you calculate it out, it's like, what would this cost the city of Chicago? Like, what would this cost New York, right? Because, you know, Metropolis roughly
I'm pulling up
corresponds to
Excel when I watch Loki tonight.
Yeah, do it. You will, some things will be illuminated for you. I have these charts. I can show them to you. My spreadsheets are quite beautiful. But yeah,
That's so cool.
I really wanted it to be real. Like I really wanted there to be like backbone there. So I'm really fun at parties, by the way. It's like, let me show you this incredible bar graph about like how Batman, like, you know, like what the math is. And it's not good. It's not
As
good.
librarians, we appreciate
Yeah,
it.
honestly, like you're talking to the right people. So
Oh yeah. I've revealed this a couple. I don't think this is like a new reveal, but before she was the auditor was the librarian. That was like her first nickname. And she became the auditor because the auditor is scarier, right? Like you don't like the librarian is somebody who will absolutely save your ass and you can approach and like is definitely like the keeper of arcane knowledge, right? But it's like there's a benevolence there that did not quite fit. Right.
We're
like
generally kind of nice people.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's like, hi, I'm the librarian. Like, oh, I super want to talk to you. Absolutely. Like, hello, I'm the auditor. I do not want to talk to you. Like, I would like whatever I need to do to get you to go away and not look at my checking account. That would be really great. But yeah, there's librarians are very dear to my heart, and it's not an accident for sure.
It's okay. Maybe there is a villainous librarian out there somewhere.
Totally.
Oh, there absolutely is. I feel like most librarians are like 3 inches from turning into the auditor. You know what I mean? Like they're like,
don't push me.
It's
They're
money for me. That's
ready.
what it would take. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. It's more like I'm going to be like I'm librarians also do an incredible subjective or subversive work, man. Like that's absolutely crucial. It's like, oh, we're going to save all of these banned books, right? Or like we're going to make sure that people have access to the internet where they're unhoused, right? Like just like legitimately like intensely subversive work that is only more crucial in the current universe in which we all presently find ourselves.
Yeah. So, thanks. But your book, one thing that we all noticed is that it's part of this kind of emerging genre of, I guess you would say superhero fiction, but it's more like villain fiction, right? Where we're taking a more critical look at the world of superheroes. So you've got like The Boys, both the comic, which I never read, but I did watch the show, Venture Brothers, the Harley Quinn series, and even like Despicable Me, right? Like it's cute, but
Megamind, I would add to this.
Yes. So, why do you, I feel like it's only recently been kind of this big thing. And so why do you think, I mean, we know why you decided to write this story, but why do you think that there's this bigger trend happening?
I think that first of all, I just think like villains are really fascinating characters. Like in general, like villains tend to be often more interesting than the heroes. They tend to be like more full humans. I feel like all superhero this is maybe a tiny bit of a tangent, but I promise it's related. I feel like all superhero stories are really just like the fairy queen, like where every character is kind of just an archetype. It's like, oh, I represent justice and I'm put in a human body and I'm walking around, but we're really just like concepts talking to each other. And I think a lot of heroes are like kind of confined by trying to represent the concept or the virtue that they are meant to embody, right? Like Batman being the spirit of vengeance, right? And, the way that, it's kind of like it's an idea distilled into human form that therefore makes them like not quite human. And I think obviously like heroes are written the best when they are at their most human. And I think that, my favorite stories are always, the ones that are kind of dig into that humanity and that like, especially that problematic humanity more. But I do think part of it is just like villains are interesting and fun and they care about things and they're very passionate. often to an obsessive degree, and like that's really interesting and that's really fun. They're also not like hamstrung by by those virtues in the same way that heroes are, right? Like they can be really driven by the things that they want, and their narratives can be really propelled by the things that they want instead of the thing they're supposed to be doing. Like a lot of heroes kind of have their personal desires or narratives like hindered or subverted, or it's like of course Batman just wants to like off the Joker, like of course he does. But he doesn't, because he can't, because that is like the archetype that he is and that he embodies, and there's all this self-imposed like no I must not, whereas villains are very much like no I must. And I think that that's just really interesting, and there's a lot of like incredibly compelling like storytelling that can take place a lot about that. Also straight up, I think that like we are at a moment where we're questioning authority a lot, and we're especially questioning like institutional authority, and we're looking at people in uniforms who we're told are supposed to represent like truth and justice and are here to protect us, and seeing that very much not match up with what is really happening in the world. And I think that we're I think that like questioning what's really going on here from in superhero stories is a direct result of us like questioning what's going on here in the kind of like institutions that surround us.
Yeah. And I was also, while you were talking, thinking about like, I think because you like the superheroes when they're at their most complex, right? When they're struggling with their humanity. And then we like villains because I think that, I don't know, I think what it does is it takes away this dichotomy between good and bad, right? Because everybody at their core is a little bit of both.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're kind of confining somebody to, and I think this is in the book too, you're like saying, okay, you're a hero, okay, you're a villain, that kind of, so everything you do has to be through that lens. But if you actually take that away, like you will find that a lot of villains are often doing like lots of virtuous stuff, like also super pointing orbital death lasers at things. Like I'm not saying they're not, but there's a surprising amount of stuff that's like, oh, that actually makes sense, in fact. And if you kind of take away the filter of hero, like not there's a lot of like really unpleasant, often unconscionable behavior happening there also, but we're just told it's being done by a hero, so it's good. So we're being told by it's done by a villain, so it's bad. And so I think that that's part of it too.
Yeah. And like I know it's like sometimes like villains are either humanized, but sometimes they also just appear as like a force of nature sometimes, and then it's like they're not so much like, I mean, look at like, kind of think of a good example, like Godzilla.
Yeah,
so like it's not like he's or and sometimes I think that's like if it doesn't have like a human perspective, like the Joker has like, he's like a tragic failed person that like, or whoever, depends on who's writing him in that time moment,
right? He's chaos magic in one way or the other, right? Like the Joker is, I think, a great example of a character who's not actually kind of a person anymore. They're just like a concept, and it's like the concept of that like true chaotic, like cannot be predicted. The Joker is incidentally the villain I would like least work for sure, because like he might just kill you because he thinks it's funny. Right? Like you can't actually like control or predict that situation like in any way whatsoever. Like you just might find it funny one day. And that I think is like truly terrifying, but also kind of prevents him from ever being like a really really humanized, unless we're talking about like the film Joker, which is like, how could this be like a human again? Like that's a other specific, like very specific project. But like, the kind of like classic comic Joker is very much that like, cosmic force at work on the world rather than person. And that's interesting in its own way.
And I think with Hench, you did a really great job of humanizing villains, because that's what I thought kind of like going in. Because like Brian, like there's like the Joker as the Rolero comic book where the guy's working with the Joker and from his perspective, and it's like, is this going to be a bunch of like narcissists that like people be victimized? And it wasn't like that at all. So I just wanted to say thanks for making the book very like human in that regards.
Big.
So I gotta ask, you said the Joker you would be definitely one you didn't want to work for, and I just am wondering who you like, what would be your choice of employer among the villains?
Oh wow, that's a great
world?
question. I think working for Doctor Doom would be really good. I think there's just like a lot of different work that can be done there, right? Like, are you a political person? Like, there's a lot of international relations stuff. You know, there's like all of Latveria to administrate, right? There's just like there's lots of science involved. There's just like many opportunities. I bet you get to travel like a lot. And like, you got to love those like European benefits and vacation time. Like, absolutely sign me up.
Yeah.
I bet he's a huge basketball fan.
Oh, interesting.
Like Lithuania is where all the great players are coming out of. And like Kim Jong-un is a huge basketball fan. I was just thinking, like, I bet Dr. Doom is like a huge, like, I bet the Olympic.
Head canon accepted. I like it. All right.
Like, that should be a whole book, is about him taking his team to the Olympics. And,
no, like, I love it. I bet, oh my God. I bet the fantasy basketball, like super villain, like server, like the secret mailing list they're all on is on fire. Like, I bet it is fantastic. Like, can you imagine the trade negotiations? Like,
oh yeah, totally. They all
10 out of 10. Absolutely. Just unbelievable. Yeah, I love it. Headcanon accepted.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a short break on that note, because I feel like it's a good place to put a pin in. And then we'll come back with Natalie Zina Walschots.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
Sounds great.
The Wichita Public Library has entered the world of streaming with Canopy. Library card holders can now access Canopy's massive collection of movies, TV shows, and educational content from the great courses. There's content for children, adults, and foreign language options too. Cardholders get 7 free checkouts a month, and Canopy's constantly updating their library, so there's always something new to watch. To find out more, please visit wichitalibrary.org/canopy, Kanopy. Canopy, just one of the many services provided to you from the Wichita Public Library.
All right, and we're back with Natalie Zina Walschots, author of Hench.
It's so awesome. I want to just talk about Dr. Doom more, because I'm also a huge Doom fan as a person.
I will talk infinitely about Dr. Doom. So,
I want to get is it Latvia? What's his country? I want to get
Latveria.
Latveria.
Yeah,
I want to see if there's. Yeah.
I had a custom T-shirt made that said Latverian ambassador that I wore to tatters in case you had any illusions about me being a cool person.
Great. Fixed.
No, I'm gonna get a custom Latveria basketball jersey.
Oh my God, that's an incredible idea. Love it.
Make sure he sends you one.
Please.
So I have a question. I saw that you were one of the finalists in Canada Reads, and Paul Sun-Yun Lee was representing you. Can you explain what that was? Because if you don't know, he's one of the older X-wing pilot on The Mandalorian that's kind of watches out for Mando. So can you tell us about that and what happened?
Yeah, for sure. So Canada Reads is an annual TV show, takes place in, kind of at the beginning of the year. And Canadian actors and singers and otherwise important cultural people are all kind of get to nominate a book that they're like, okay, this, they get matched with a bunch, but they get to nominate a book that's like, okay, I think I love this book. I think this is great. And then it's sort of it's like Canada's like book club kind of thing. So the idea is that, if you want to participate, everybody reads all of the books and you like watch along, and, hopefully your favorite, it's very, very cool and sweet, and hopefully your favorite book wins. And Paul Sun-Hyung Lee chose Hench, and like complete surprise and joy to me. And it turns out he is an absolute delight of a human person. I loved getting to meet him and talk to him, and he got the book so profoundly. Like, he connected with it super deeply. He super understood what I was trying to do. And I think he defended Hench absolutely, like, wonderfully for the time that I was on the show. We made it to about the halfway point, which I am thrilled about. Like, honestly, it was just like, I made it to the show. Incredible. So yeah, it was all my co-authors, also, like, everybody featured was just like lovely too. And it was a wonderful experience. And it was like, I think it put Hench in front of a bunch of people who might not have realized it. Like, I feel like when the book first came out, like, a lot of like people aroundish my age were like, this is amazing. And then like Canada Reads happened, and then suddenly all their moms were like, hey, I really like this book, actually. Like, it kind of just like reached an audience, and a kind of like more general audience. And I think at least in Canada that it would have otherwise. And I was really pleased by how positive that reception was. Also from folks who might not have seen it otherwise or read it otherwise. So yeah, it was great. It was such a wonderful experience.
That's awesome.
That's so cool.
So it's like an elimination reality show, but it's literary based. That's Stairs an American. Like, it's like, right? Like over here, it's like Hot Mom Island is a show. Like, it's like, it must be really nice to have universal health care and shows that promote literacy on television.
Listen, it is. So a question I've been asked a lot is, hey, like, we noticed that the auditor doesn't super talk about like the cost of healthcare, and like, that doesn't really come up in the book. Is that because you're Canadian? And I'm like, yes. Also, that if it was about that, it would be the only thing the book was about, which is a joke, and also not at all. Like, it is just for sure. Like, well, that's the book then. Like, if we're gonna do that, then it's entirely about, that kind of physical cost and that kind of medical cost. And there was just like more I wanted to put in there. But honestly, I don't know how you guys manage that down there, man. It is terrifying.
About the fact that she doesn't talk about the cost. Like, it just. Anyway,
Ian, one of the producers of the show, wanted to ask us a question that that's what we're covering. It's like, do henchmen deserve universal health care?
Everybody deserves every human deserves universal health care. Like, like Canada for sure has like its own problems, and I'm definitely not saying that we have figured it all out, because we definitely have not. But I don't really understand how a society functions without it, full stop. So yes, hench people absolutely do deserve high quality, universally accessible healthcare, which, by the way, includes dental and glasses and physiotherapy. Like, when I'm saying medical, I don't just mean like, a ride in an ambulance. I mean like healthcare. And so does everyone in prison, and so does everyone living below the poverty line, and so does every single category of person. So that is a very easy guess. Yes, they do answer for me.
Well, let's talk about the way that you do write about Anna's injuries, because they do get a little specific in some areas, especially when you're talking about putting pins in legs and things like that. Spoiler alert, Anna has some really bad injuries.
Don't Google them. Don't Google what's a spiral fracture.
Yeah. I Googled it, so you don't have to.
But we wanted to know, like, what kind of research you did to be able to write that kind of a scene and those injuries for Anna. Like, do you have any sort of background in medical? Because honestly, we weren't sure. It was very well written. So,
well, thank you.
Yes, tell us about your research for the medical stuff.
I was also wondering if you had suffered some of these injuries.
Oh yeah.
I have thankfully not. I have not actually broken a bone. All of my damage has been soft tissue, happily / unhappily. But I have always been like two things. One, I've always been incredibly fascinated by like medical science in general. Like that was like one of my like weird little kid interests. Like I would like read anatomy books for fun as a small child. Cause that's definitely,
cool.
Yeah, average interest.
Kid hobbies.
Weird little kid hobbies. And it's just a fascination that like never left me. I'm also a huge fan of mixed martial arts. And that gets you really like, you gain a lot of like ambient trauma knowledge. So it's like a thing that happens after every fight, usually a couple days later, once everybody's been to the hospital, is the injury report. This may be a familiar phrase to those of you who have read the book. And that is like, okay, this is what actually happened to the fighters. It's like, okay, this person has a fractured orbital. This person tore their ACL. And it's like, this is what is wrong. This is how long it's going to take to heal. They have a medical suspension for this long, no contact until this date. So you get this very detailed breakdown about the actual like trauma that was sustained. So you get to like watch, if you're me, you watch a fight, and then a couple of days later, you like study the injury report to see like, okay, what really happened there. And fighters will often post on their like social media, like photos of their healing journey and stuff like that too. So that's also been like an endless source of like really fascinating information for me. For Anna's injury in particular, I wanted to pick something that was survivable, right? That was something you could technically fully heal from, right? Where like there would be a point at which you were considered like, healed full stop, whatever that means, that would also have lifetime repercussions, right? Where it's like, this is something that is going to impact her for the rest of her life on a daily basis. And in some ways, like change how she navigates the world. And in her case, it's in a lot of ways, she needs a mobility aid afterwards. I find medical stuff really fascinating. I find medical science fascinating. The like leaps we have made just in the last 100 years are like astonishing in terms of just like what you can live through, like pre versus post anesthetic. Like anyway, I find it an endlessly interesting topic.
So was there a short list of injuries that Super Collider was going to inflict on Anna? Like,
that's a great question. Like, well, I mean, like, yes and no. It was always going to be a specific type of injury, right? It's like, well, it's probably, it's probably going to be a significant structural break. I don't want it to involve severe nerve damage, so that like rules out a bunch of things. I don't want it to be totally superficial, so that rules out a bunch of things. It needs to have like a healing period that's long enough that it's effectively going to take her out of her current work pool. So she's going to have to like, reapply. So it's not like, if you break your foot, you're like, they're like, I don't know, you can like wear a boot or not, I don't care. And then like 4 weeks later, you're fine. Right? A non-complex, like, you know what I mean? Like a regular, like, oh, I broke my foot. not a big deal. So there was like, the list got pretty short once it was like, it has to fit in these parameters, right? So, it needs to be it's like guaranteed trip to the hospital that's going to require at least overnight. Like they're not just going to send her home immediately. There was a bunch of stuff. And yeah, when all was said and done, like a complex spiral fracture was like ticked all the right boxes, required like the correct amount of intervention, would have the right amount of impact on her life moving forward. That would also be something she could in some form walk away from.
Yeah, there's a lot of thought behind that. You're just like, oh, she just broke her leg. Just reading it. I'm just enjoying the story. Yeah. And then it's like, oh wow, that's a lot of work. Okay, but you also take her because that whole moment where after her surgeries and she has to camp out on her friend's couch and she's like delving into madness that she then channels into the injury report. You do a pretty good job of talking about the psychological trauma that accompanies those physical injuries. And so how did you research all of that?
I have another great question. I've never experienced this specific type of medical trauma, but I've certainly experienced like other forms of trauma and gone through that, like very similar kinds of healing processes on my friends' couches at, other points in my life. So certainly like there's that personal experience. I have provided, I've been like primary caretaker for loved ones who have been going through like significant healing processes or recovering from significant injuries. I've also I assisted with a couple of my friends, like parents after similar situations where like I have a pretty high, like a medical thing has to be done, somebody has to do it tolerance. Again, just kind of like ambiently from the things I'm interested in. This is something that's happened. So if somebody's like, someone needs to do this, like someone needs to like pull this thing out, or somebody needs to ride with somebody when they go to the hospital, and this is kind of gross, it's probably going to be me. So there's like, I have done that a bunch. So this is certainly drawing on from like that personal experience, as well as like a whole bunch of research, talking to some of those people directly, them being very generous with their time and answering my questions, or just like reading a lot of recovery, like first person recovery narratives was also really important to that part of the process. I also this seems peripherally related, but like it's actually very useful. I am a migraine sufferer. They're relatively they're pretty under control right now, but they're like relatively frequent in my case. And when I was living in Calgary, where the barometric pressure was crazy, it was an extremely painful and difficult 4 years for me. So I think just having the kind of like lived experience of a chronic pain condition is like also, and I'm not saying you can't write about these things if this is not the highly specialized first person knowledge that you have, but it definitely helped. Like it definitely like was an important, like intimate knowledge that I could draw on for those kinds of experiences.
Okay. Well, it came across because, you just don't, it came across very real. So
yeah, and it's like a detailed book in ways that I don't think that like people appreciate things. Like if you read like a run of the mill like detective novel like a James Patterson or something, it's like you don't think about the injuries or whatever, like recovering, like when like the main character gets beat up and stuff. And it's like I like that about the book, and it was like, oh, this is like, wow, like it's relatable. Like it's relatable. Like, oh, it's like one thing to be like when I had like surgery. I had my first surgery. It was like a gum graft, and it's like you all think about surgery. You don't think about the aftercare,
right,
of the surgery. and like
yeah.
how like a pain in the butt the aftercare of a surgery is, and it's like
It is massive. My partner had the sinus lift, and so like it's no joke, right? And a lot of procedures where they're like, oh, this is like incredibly minor, like you'll be fine. No, you won't. Like
my mom
whoever
had
is
that.
saying this is wrong. Like I had this is, doesn't sound like a major thing, but I had all 4 of my wisdom teeth out at once in kind of an emergency procedure.
Thanks.
When I was in undergrad, and like I could not eat for a month. Like I could not like chew solid food for 4 weeks. Like it was a nightmare. Like my recovery, and I heal fast. Like I heal like Wolverine. Like I like my partner jokes because he heals like a very old man with scurvy, and I'm like, no, I'm good. Like just like you practically like see the cut healing itself. But it was like a terrible long experience. It was so bad. So, but yeah, I don't think we spend, and like maybe this is just me and my weird brain, but like I don't think we spend enough time like really digging into the humanity of our bodies, right? And like what is required to have a body and the amount of maintenance these things require, and like just how long recovery times actually are and can be, and how deeply personal that is, and how like like it can be like that's such a personal and intimate experience, like being inside of a healing body. And the like recovery times are so all over the place, and I don't think we give enough sort of like fictional space for that. Like I think it's actually like really interesting, and I think a lot of people, especially in hero stories, like skip over that because it's like, oh, we need to get to like the good stuff as quickly as possible, so we need to show like how the hero just like stapled gun themselves back together and put some gauze over it and they're like fine 2 days later. It's like, no, you're not. You absolutely are not. And like, but digging into the like realness of what not means and what healing is actually like, I find that part actually really, really interesting.
I feel like it's something that you see in a certain kind of novel, like Jack London or something, where it's like a survival something, and it's like
survival. Really, I give you that for sure.
Yeah, and I don't like, but the thing you were kind of talking about with Wolverine, this goes into our next question. So we kind of talked about how like you said earlier, like technology these days is kind of like people's healing from, or can heal from anything. Like on a lesser note though, but like we're seeing it, we're living in the age of cybernetics at this point. And Anna has cybernetic enhancements. And in today's world, we have VR goggles, we have wearable technology and smart speakers. Do you have any like high-tech gadgets that you find particularly helpful with your writing or just daily life? Or you find, because you're a tech person too, right? Like
yeah. I'm so like I've done some work in game development, and my favorite work that I've done is in VR for sure, and like other interactive experiences. So like I really love role-playing games, like writing for them and like kind of multiple choice or branching narratives. And I really like technology that like furthers that or fosters that in some way. So like all of that is super fascinating to me. Like I love the kind of constraint that is possible within or there's both the constraint and the opportunity of writing in VR, or like, again, like any kind of like interactive medium where like I am doing a thing and the story is changing over there. I wrote an interactive experience called The Aluminum Cat, where it was like a scheduled interactive storytelling experience where the like narrator would respond to the real-time audience's prompts as to what was to happen next in the story. So like the audience would vote, and then she would put on a different costume and like go down that branch of the story, right? It was like very, very interesting. So anything that kind of I guess, serves those kind of liminal mediums, I think is really, really cool.
Kind of like choose your own adventure 2.0, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So things that like work in that way, I find super, super fascinating. I do build my own keyboards, which is an incredibly dorky habit that I very much enjoy. That's probably the most like, when it comes to like things that help me with my writing, like having an interface that feels good to work with, right? Because it's like, it's eyes and hands, right? It's all I got. So things that can make that experience easier and more pleasurable and more invisible.
And
right?
you're making mechanical keyboards, right? So
What
like,
does that mean?
yeah.
Can you explain
Oh,
that?
okay. Yeah, sure. So the mechanical part is the actual, like the mechanism of the like switch inside the key. So when you push a key, what happens? Like what is it just, if you're typing on a non-mechanical keyboard, you don't get that kind of like physical feedback of like, I am pressing a thing. I'm getting the tactile feedback of the key pressing down. Let me see if I can. So here, this is one. So this is my keyboard right there. And I just took this key off so I can show you. So under every key, it's a switch right here. This little guy. And there's it feels very different to type on. It's an actual like mechanical process with a spring in it. So you're like pushing the spring down, and then once you have exerted enough pressure on it, it bottoms out, sends the okay, yes, there was a key press, and then it pops back up. And it's I find a much more pleasurable typing experience than like, a standard like what's on your laptop.
Do you think it changes your writing style at all?
And
Because
faster.
you have it faster.
Yeah. So the kind of like flow from brain out is a bit quicker. So there's less self-editing in that process, but it's mostly like faster, feels better, feels more invisible. If it can't feel, it's like pleasurable at best, invisible at worst is kind of what I'm going for there. So it's, like it's coming out as quickly and smoothly as I make it happen.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I gotta try that. I have one. I haven't really written a lot, but I might bring it to work and one of my coworkers get my reports done.
I still can't quite like understand how it's different, but maybe So
do you know like the typewriter, the manual typewriter we use? You know how like they're heavier keys and it makes noise. It's kind of like that, but the keyboard.
Yeah, they're clickier.
Yeah.
You say you can type faster. I find that the more I have to lift my finger, like when they have the high keys. Man.
Oh yeah. I typed most of Hench on like like a goblin on my like old laptop, like hunched on the edge of my couch for sure. And when I switched over to like something else, it definitely was a learning, like there was a learning curve, right? Like I wasn't immediately faster, but all I can say is that the tactile feedback, like once your brain learns it, is really nice. And it is a spring, so you're getting feedback. Like it's not like on a lot of typewriters, like there's like the labor of pushing the key down, right? That feels good for different people for different reasons. On a lot of keyboards, you're kind of like, it's also pushing back, if that makes any sense, right? Like there is a spring inside of it. So it's not like hitting a typewriter is almost like piano keys, and then the key is going up, making, not the key, but like the piece of type is sort of like flinging up and making the mark on the page in the same way a piano's like hammer is striking the chords, right? So you're driving that piece of type. And so you have to like, almost like a little trebuchet, right? Like you have to push hard enough to like hit that mechanism so it will like impress onto the paper with the ink.
We actually have some of the they're not mechanical, but we have some of the older, bigger key Dell keyboards here.
Oh
if you
yeah.
want to try out those compared to like the flatter key ones. Like
Yeah.
I like the older ones better.
Like keys.
The IBM, if you can get a like Model M, an old IBM Model M with the buckling keys, those are the good ones. Those are if you have any of those lying around.
I think we have one Dynex system that's gathering dust in one of the like that probably has some.
You should see. I mean, you should see if you should auction it off. See if some mechanical keyboard enthusiast is looking for exactly that.
So you said you write for VR, right? So you've written but have you written it in VR too? Like using like, I know when you put on you could do virtual desktop.
No. I've been
curious about that, like putting on the goggles and accessing your personal computer through VR.
Whoa.
But I don't. That's like a thing you could do, but I haven't tried it yet.
I have not tried that. No. I have definitely not tried that. I enjoy being in VR. Like I don't get nauseous, which is great for me, because some people like super do. But it is like I find it physically demanding. Right, because it's your kind of like whole proprioceptive system is thrown off. So like the way you move through space changes, and so like, yeah, I find it very tiring physically, like much more so than moving through like non-VR space, because my body is doing all of these like micro adaptations to all of it's almost like gravity is slightly different. It's like, oh, when I move, usually it takes this much force to move my hand this far, but in VR, it might be like way more or way less. So your brain is doing all of these like calculations to account for the differences in the way that you're moving through space, all of which is unconscious, of course, but it's really exhausting over time. Like it's very, very like mentally and physically taxing.
I don't think I've ever. I know I have not actually ever experienced the VR.
It's
I've heard them here at the library, and I've still never like.
It's fun. You should try it.
Yeah.
It's surprisingly.
There's book clubs. They have VR book clubs.
They're really good. Yeah. The boxing workouts are great. Beat Saber is amazing. So anything that's like if you're a rhythm game person at all, like it's super fun. Probably still the best VR game ever created. Okay. If you're a horror fan, horror in VR is terrifying because there is no way to convince your body that is not actually happening. Like it is just your lizard brain is like, no, I am in a room with a serial killer. Like that is what is happening. I am here. And cool. So if that's like a fun experience for you, I recommend. I can't actually do it very much or for very long because it's like legit terrifying, but it is really fun.
I'm gonna steer clear of that one, but good recommendation.
Reasonable.
We'll put them in the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Natalie, this has been a really fun talk to you today. What's next for you? Or I feel like you set Hench up for a sequel. Very clearly. And I feel like I did read that one is coming out soon.
That is correct. Yeah. So the sequel is like underway. It is due to come out fall 2024. Okay. So I am actually about to get a round of edits. So I am very much looking forward to that and digging in. And but I've been working on the sequel for a couple of years now, almost since like right after the first one came out. So I will be doing that. I have a couple of like other things in the works that are still currently under NDA, but the next big project is getting the sequel out into the world.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Did you say you're also working on a PhD?
Oh no, I dropped out of the PhD in 2015. Okay. No, I am a failed academic.
Wow. Okay.
No, goodness, no.
You tried. It's amazing.
Yeah, I did. I did indeed get into it's actually like, this is very much like a Hench question, but like, I really hit this wall where I was like, I don't want to be analyzing do I want to be analyzing the texts, or do I want to be making them, right? Like, do I want to be the person writing about the games, or do I want to make the games? Do I want to be the person who's analyzing the literature, or do I want to be making the literature, right? Like that's, and I straight up decided I wanted to be making the stuff. So I left the academy to do, and it was something I had always been trying to do both of. And, I made the decision to make the stuff instead, and I am very happy that I did.
Oh, well, we like the
Yeah.
stuff that you've made so
It's
far.
so
Hey,
good.
thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any place people can find you online? Any socials that you prefer, or anything like that? Like
Yeah, I am,
Twitter, Instagram, all those. X, I'm
Yeah, I
sorry.
was about to say Twitter.
Twitter just no longer exists.
Yeah, I'm Natalie Zed, all one word, most places. So NATALIEZED, ZED, I guess if you're American, and that includes Blue Sky. I'm probably on Blue Sky the most right now. But yeah, I'm less present on social media than I was, unfortunately, for reasons. But yeah, if you see Natalie Zed, it's probably me.
Cool.
Cool.
Awesome. Can't wait to read the next book.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
already looking forward to it.
I hope you like
Thank
it.
you so much for joining us and sharing the background and your research and all of that interesting stuff with the book. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's cool talking to you. And yeah, the keyboard looked cool. It's like,
Thank you.
this was a great episode. Thank you. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Did you know that the Wichita Public Library offers a large selection of digital magazines for free? They are easy to access and are now available to you on the Libby app. You can download Libby from your phone or tablet's app store, sign in with your Wichita Public Library card, and start browsing immediately. Magazines can be found under the Guide section on Libby and include popular magazine titles about news and politics, cooking, celebrity news, healthy living, and more. For additional information on Libby, please visit wichita.overdrive.com. Here are some reading recommendations for Category 5, a book told from the villain's point of view, and other categories from our community of readers in the ReadICT Facebook group. If you'd like to leave your own book review to be featured on a future episode of the podcast, call our book review hotline at 316-261-8507. Leaving a review is easy. After the voice prompt, record your name, location if you're outside Wichita, what ReadICT category your book recommendation is for, title and author of the book, and a brief reason why you recommend it to other readers. If you're looking to connect with other like-minded readers online, be sure to join our Facebook group. Just search for the group #ReadICT Challenge and click Join. You can also find more reading recommendations for this and other categories by visiting wichitalibrary.org/readict. The Christie Affair by Nina de Cremont. The author takes the mistress, Nan, of Agatha Christie's first husband and makes her into the victim. I liked it overall. I found it a bit disconcerting just because you go back and forth between liking Nan and disliking Nan, but I guess that's the point. Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I struggled with this in the beginning and nearly gave up on it. I'm so glad I didn't because I ended up loving it. A great thriller novel with some amazing twists. Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. It's such a cutting attack on so much about the publishing industry, I'm kind of surprised it was ever released. The Custom of the Country by Edith Wharton. Undine Spragg, the extraordinarily beautiful main character, unbelievably selfish, sails through old New York society of the late 1800s, destroying lives along the way in pursuit of status and wealth. She is horrible and a totally fascinating character.
Brianna Copenhaver in the Wichita area, mystery, and it is And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. This book is very interesting and keeps you on the edge of your seat. The ending is very surprising. There's a wonderful twist, and overall it is well written and keeps the reader engaged throughout the story.
Hey, this is Cindy. I'm leaving a book review to fulfill a space on my Beanstack bingo card. The title of the book I read is Not a Happy Family by Sherry Lapina. And this is a mystery or thriller book. And my review would be, which family member killed Fred and Sheila Merton? This was a quick read, a page turner for me. You could easily compare this book to the movie Knives Out or Clue or even a whodunit mystery. Thank you.
This is Kim in Wichita, and I read Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. It would be perfect for the book about a secret society. If you like character-driven stories that don't really rely too much on what's going on around them, but more how the characters are developing inside the society, this one is for you.
That was a great episode, but I gotta say, I feel a little bit like unsure of a lot of the villains. Like I don't know a lot of villains. I don't even know who Dr. Doom is. What show was he from?
That's Reed Richards' arch nemesis from the Fantastic Four. He's like he's actually like a monarch of a country that's cut off from the world. So he's just kind of like Kim Jong-un if he had a suit of armor on constantly.
Oh.
So yeah.
Can we say that?
I think so. I don't know if I don't think they get Return of North Korea. So.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
It was a great time, and yeah, I can't wait to read the next book. So awesome. Anyway, a list of the books discussed in today's episode can be found in the accompanying show notes. To request any of the books heard about in today's episode, visit wichitalibrary.org or call us at 316-261-8500.
Thank you so much to Natalie Zina Walschots for joining us for today's recording. We would also like to thank all of those out there who shared recommendations with us that we can then recommend to you.
This has been a production of the Wichita Public Library, and a big thanks goes out to our production crew and podcast team.
To participate in the ReadICT Reading Challenge, visit wichitalibrary.org/readict. Stay connected with other ReadICT participants on the ReadICT Challenge Facebook page. Find out what's trending near you, post book reviews, look for local and virtual events, and share book humor with like-minded folks. To join the group, search hashtag ReadICT Challenge on Facebook and click Join.
And don't forget to log your books in the reading tracker at Beanstack. Each month you log in a book. In the challenge, you're eligible to win fun prizes. If you need any assistance signing up or logging books, give us a call, reach us on chat, or stop by your nearest branch.
You can follow this podcast through the Spotify app or stream episodes on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. If you'd like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe and share with all your friends. Bye!
Bye!